You know, when we usually think about biological survival, we tend to picture things like, well, speed or strength or maybe camouflage.
Right, something super active.
Yeah, exactly. You think of a cheetah sprinting across the savannah or, I don't know, a chameleon blending perfectly into a branch.
We basically expect survival mechanisms to be these highly visible, really kinetic actions, like an action sequence on a nature documentary,
Right, an animal using massive amounts of energy to escape a threat. But then you look at a tiny, single-celled microalgae trapped in a drying puddle.
which is a whole different level of stress.
It really is. Think about the reality of that environment for a second. The water is evaporating. The sun is just like baking it with raw, unfiltered ultraviolet radiation.
And the temperature is spiking.
Exactly. The salinity is going off the charts and has no legs to run away. It's essentially facing biological apocalypse.
So what does it do?
Right. Instead of moving, it just stops. It changes color. It turns from this normal green to a deep, vibrant blood red.
It literally shuts down its normal operations and builds a chemical bunker.
Yeah, it creates this microscopic force field that allows it to essentially hibernate. I
Yeah.
mean, it can survive without water, under intense radiation, not just for a few days, but for years,
Sometimes decades, actually.
which is wild. And today, welcome to our deep dive because we are looking strictly at that exact force field. We are decoding the molecule that is responsible for that incredible survival feat.
A molecule that, by the way, also happens to be the underlying reason wild salmon are pink.
Right. And why flamingos have those brightly colored feathers. We are talking about astaxanthin.
It is the absolute definition of a biological paradox. I mean, we're looking at a pigment synthesized by algae purely to survive extreme lethal environmental stress.
But then something crazy happens when it moves up the food chain.
Exactly. When humans consume it, the same pigment doesn't just sit there. It acts as a highly specialized dynamic cellular shield.
Oh, yes.
It alters genetic transcription pathways, it easily crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it literally protects our skin from within against UV damage.
And the claims surrounding it online are just wild. If you spend like 5 minutes on the internet, you've got the beauty industry calling it an internal fountain of youth.
Yeah, for sure.
You have endurance athletes using it for rapid recovery, and all these biohackers talking about turning on longevity genes. So our mission today on this deep dive is to basically cut through the marketing noise, ignore all the hype, and look strictly at the biological reality.
Which is what we do best.
Exactly. We have a massive stack of research today. We're talking comprehensive pharmaceutical literature, advanced clinical evidence reviews, meta-analyses, and medical guidelines from places like WebMD and the European Food Safety Authority.
So a really solid foundation of data.
Yep. We are going to decode the pharmacology of astaxanthin and figure out exactly what happens when you ingest this deep-sea survival suit.
It's a journey worth taking, honestly. Because when you actually dig into the clinical data and the molecular biology, the reality of what this molecule is doing inside your body is arguably more impressive than any of those marketing claims.
Okay, let's unpack this from the very beginning. What exactly are we looking at under the microscope? The foundational definition we have here is that astaxanthin is a naturally occurring, fat-soluble, red-orange carotenoid belonging to the xanthophyll family.
That's a mouthful.
Right. Its chemical formula is C40H52O4, and it has a melting point of 224 degrees Celsius. For those of us who haven't set foot in an organic chemistry lab since high school, what does that actually mean in plain English?
Right. Let's strip away all that jargon. You're probably familiar with carotenoids in general.
Like carrots.
Exactly. They're the organic pigments that give carrots their bright orange color, or tomatoes their deep red color. Beta-carotene and lycopene are the classic examples.
Okay, I know those.
Well, astaxanthin belongs to a specific subclass of these plant pigments called xanthophylls. And the word xanthophyle simply means the molecule contains oxygen, where something like standard beta-carotene does not.
Ah, okay.
Then you have the keto part of the name. That refers to specific oxygen-containing groups, which are called ketone groups, situated on the very ends of the molecule.
So it's basically a much more heavily oxygenated, highly modified cousin of the stuff we get from eating carrots.
That is a great way to picture it, actually.
Yeah.
And its origin story in the wild is what sets up its entire journey through biology.
Back to the puddle.
Right, back to the puddle. In nature, the primary original producers of astaxanthin are those microalgae we mentioned. The most famous one, and the one used almost exclusively in commercial extraction, is called Haematococcus pluvialis.
Haematococcus pluvialis. Got it.
There's also a type of yeast called Xanthophyllomyces dendrorhaus, and some specific marine bacteria that can synthesize it too.
Yeah.
But here is the major catch. They don't just produce it all the time.
They only make it when they're stressed, right?
Yes. They only manufacture large amounts of it when they are severely stressed out, like when they are starved of nitrogen or when their water supply dries up and they're just getting blasted with sunlight.
So it really is a panic button. It's an emergency response system.
It totally is. And from that initial panic button, it enters the global food chain.
How does that work?
Well, the microalgae are eaten by zooplankton, like krill. The krill are then eaten by smaller fish and crustaceans like shrimp, crawfish, and lobster.
Oh, which is why a lobster turns red when you cook it.
Exactly. The protein binding the pigment breaks down, and the astaxanthin color pops out. Then those smaller creatures are eaten by larger predators, like salmon and trout.
Okay.
But the animals themselves, like the salmon or the flamingos, they cannot synthesize astaxanthin on their own. They simply accumulate it in their tissues over time. A wild sockeye salmon is pink purely because of its diet.
It's like a biological game of pass the parcel. The algae make the ultimate survival suit. The krill put it on, the salmon eats the krill, and then the salmon wears the suit to survive the massive oxidative stress of swimming hundreds of miles upstream against a raging river.
That's a perfect analogy. And if we take that past the parcel idea a step further, it perfectly highlights why this molecule is so heavily studied in human medicine.
Because the salmon needs it for more than just color.
Exactly. The salmon isn't just turning pink for aesthetic reasons. It is physically utilizing the molecular stability of the astaxanthin to protect its muscle tissue from degrading during that insane athletic feat.
Wow.
And what's fascinating here is the structural uniqueness of the molecule itself. If we connect this to the bigger picture of antioxidants, we run into a very common, very frustrating problem in nutritional science.
What's the problem?
Well, many classic antioxidants like high-dose beta-carotene or vitamin E can actually become pro-oxidants under certain conditions.
Wait, pro-oxidant, meaning they cause damage.
Yes. They neutralize a free radical, but in the process, they become highly unstable themselves and start causing cellular damage.
I've actually seen the data on that. It's why taking massive megadoses of certain synthetic vitamins hasn't worked out the way researchers hoped in long-term clinical trials. They end up causing the very rust they were supposed to prevent.
Precisely.
But if astaxanthin is just a plant pigment, why doesn't it flip and become a pro-oxidant? Why is the scientific community treating it like a pharmacological powerhouse instead of just another vitamin?
It comes down to its molecular architecture and how it handles violent energy. Astaxanthin has these two polar ionone rings at both ends of a long lipophilic or fat-loving central carbon chain.
Okay, rings on the ends, fat-loving chain in the middle.
Right. And each of these rings has a hydroxyl group and a ketone group. When a free radical detects, and remember, a free radical is just a highly reactive molecule desperately looking to steal an electron, astaxanthin can absorb that extra destructive energy.
But it doesn't break.
No. Instead of becoming unstable, the long carbon chain allows the molecule to safely dissipate that extra energy as heat.
Oh, wow.
It basically acts as a molecular shock absorber. It hands over the electron, absorbs the impact, and remains completely stable without turning into a dangerous radical itself.
That makes so much sense. The structural details in our research stack also made a massive deal out of the shape of the molecule. I kept seeing references to isomers, specifically that the trans form, or the 3S configuration, is the one that actually matters for human health.
Yeah, the spatial arrangement of atoms in a molecule matters immensely in human biology. A molecule can have the exact same chemical formula, the exact same number of carbons and oxygens, but be arranged differently in 3D space.
Like left and right hands.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
Think of your right hand and your left hand. They're structurally identical, but you can't fit your right hand into a left-handed glove.
Right.
Receptors and transport proteins in the human body are exactly like those gloves. In the case of astaxanthin, it exists in cis and trans forms.
And the trans form is the correct key for the human biological lock.
Exactly. The 3S trans configuration is the specific, naturally occurring shape found in that Haematococcus pluvialis algae.
But what about other shapes?
Well, while some synthetic laboratory models suggest the cis isomers might have decent antioxidant capacity in a test tube, human pharmacokinetic trials reveal a completely different story.
Pharmacokinetic meaning how it actually moves through our bodies.
Yes, studies that track how a drug actually moves through living human blood and tissue. And the all-trans conformation has a profoundly superior absorption rate and bioavailability in human blood plasma.
So, if someone is buying cheap synthetic astaxanthin, what are they actually getting?
Synthetic astaxanthin is largely derived from petrochemicals.
Petrochemicals, yikes.
Yeah, and it's used mostly in commercial animal feed to artificially color farmed fish.
Yeah.
It's usually a chaotic mix of different isomers, left hands, right hands, twisted shapes.
And our bodies don't like that.
Not at all. The human body struggles to recognize and transport this synthetic mix, which drastically reduces its bioactivity compared to the natural 3S form.
Okay, so we have this incredibly stable, structurally unique, heat-dissipating molecule. But to really understand why it's so powerful, we need to dive into cellular architecture. Our cells are surrounded by a membrane, which is basically a double layer of fats, right? A lipid bilayer.
Right. It's an ocean of fat that creates a boundary. It keeps the watery environment of the inside of the cell enclosed and the watery outside world out.
Now, if I take vitamin C, which is water-soluble, it kind of just hangs out on the watery outside of that lipid cell membrane, right? It can't penetrate the fat.
Correct.
And if I take beta-carotene, which is fat-soluble, it buries itself deep inside the fatty middle of the membrane. But astaxanthin does something completely different because of those polar rings and that fat-loving chain.
Because of that amphipathic nature, meaning it possesses both water-loving and fat-loving properties, astaxanthin physically anchors itself across the entire lipid bilayer.
It goes all the way through.
It literally spans the entire thickness of the cell membrane. One water-loving polar end sits on the outside of the cell, the long, fat-loving chain stretches all the way through the fatty middle, and the other water-loving polar end sits on the inside of the cell.
I picture the cell membrane as a brick wall. Vitamin C is like a fresh coat of paint on the outside of the wall. Beta-carotene is stuffed into the mortar deep between the bricks. But astaxanthin is like a piece of solid steel rebar driven straight vertically through the entire wall.
I love that visual.
It gives the wall profound structural integrity while simultaneously fighting off cellular rust from the outside, the inside, and the middle.
And if we push that rebar idea further, imagine that rebar is also highly reactive to threats. It explains why astaxanthin is uniquely effective at preventing what cellular biologists call lipid peroxidation.
Which is basically the rusting, right?
Yeah. Essentially, yes. Lipid peroxidation is your cell membranes rusting, degrading, and turning rancid due to free radical damage. Because astaxanthin physically and structurally stabilizes the membrane, it provides a level of comprehensive protection that other single-zone antioxidants simply cannot match.
It covers all the bases.
Right. It neutralizes reactive oxygen species, or ROS, in the watery polar zones inside and outside the cell, and in the nonpolar fatty zone right in the middle.
I was reading that this is especially critical for our mitochondria, the little energy factories inside our cells.
Absolutely. Mitochondria are fascinating because they actually have their own inner and outer membranes, and the very process of generating cellular energy, taking the food we eat and the oxygen we breathe and turning it into ATP, naturally creates a massive amount of free radical exhaust.
So it's a dangerous place to work.
It is an incredibly high-stress oxidative environment. Astaxanthin embeds into the mitochondrial membrane and protects it from self-destructing. It preserves the mitochondrial membrane potential and specifically stops the opening of the mitochondrial permeability transition pore.
The what pore? What happens if that pore opens?
If that pore opens, the mitochondrion swells, ruptures, and releases proteins that trigger immediate cell death. Apoptosis.
Oh, wow.
Astaxanthin literally barricades the doors to safeguard the cell's energy factories from blowing themselves up.
That is intense. But there is a crucial mechanism here that totally shifts how we should think about antioxidants. Astaxanthin isn't just a passive shield waiting for free radicals to bounce off of it. The clinical literature emphasizes that it acts via hormesis.
Right. Hormesis is a vital biological concept. It refers to a mild adaptive stress that trains an organism or a cell to defend itself.
Like lifting weights.
It's exactly like physical exercise. Lifting weights causes microscopic tears in your muscle fibers. It is a mild, controlled stress. But your body responds to that stress by building denser, stronger muscles. Astaxanthin acts as a hormetic nutrient.
So it's not just absorbing punches, it's actively training the body's cells to throw punches back. But how does a pigment do that?
It acts on a fundamental genetic level by modulating a pathway called NRF2.
NRF2.
Normally, NRF2 is a protein that just sits quietly in the cellular fluid, held captive by another protein called KEAP1. When astaxanthin interacts with the cell membrane, it creates a very mild, beneficial signal that causes the KEAP1 to release its grip.
And then what happens?
The NRF2 protein detaches and travels straight into the cell nucleus.
Like a messenger running into the central command center?
Precisely. Once inside the nucleus, NRF2 binds to specific DNA sequences known as antioxidant response elements, or RE.
And what does that trigger?
This binding event triggers the cell's DNA to start mass-producing the body's own master endogenous antioxidant enzymes. We are talking about enzymes like superoxide dismutase, or SOD, and catalase.
Wait, how do those compare to the antioxidants we just get from foods?
They are vastly more powerful than any antioxidant molecule you could ever eat.
Really?
Yeah. Dietary antioxidants operate on a 1-to-1 ratio. One molecule of vitamin C neutralizes one free radical, and then it's done.
It's used up?
Right. But endogenous enzymes like SOD are catalytic. A single molecule of superoxide dismutase can neutralize millions of free radicals per second, over and over again, without being destroyed.
Millions per second.
Yes. Astaxanthin is literally altering your genetic transcription to turn your own cells into heavy-duty antioxidant factories.
That is wild. It's rewriting the software of the cell's defense system. And it doesn't stop there. I noticed references to it interacting with the mTOR and AMPK pathways. I know from reading about general longevity science that these are huge buzzwords right now.
They are the master physiological controllers of cellular metabolism, energy sensing, and aging.
Let's start with AMPK.
AMPK is the pathway that acts as a fuel gauge. It senses when your body is low on energy. When you activate AMPK, it tells the body to boost insulin sensitivity, burn stored fat for energy, and clear out cellular waste.
So it's a good thing to activate.
Very much so. Astaxanthin stimulates AMPK. On the flip side, you have mTOR. mTOR is a pathway associated with cellular growth and building protein.
Which sounds good, right?
When you're a growing child or trying to build muscle, mTOR is great. But when mTOR is constantly activated in an adult, it's heavily linked to accelerated aging, metabolic syndrome, and even cancer proliferation.
Because the body is trying to grow when it should be repairing.
Exactly. Astaxanthin mildly inhibits mTOR, so it is delicately balancing these two critical pathways to favor deep metabolic health, repair, and resilience over unchecked growth.
Okay, so if we zoom out from the microscopic level of a single cell membrane and these genetic pathways, what does this rebar-like fortification mean for the whole body? This brings us to the systemic alarm system, right? Inflammation and immunity.
Right. Oxidative stress and chronic inflammation are basically two sides of the same biological coin. You rarely find one without the other driving a vicious cycle. And astaxanthin is remarkably adept at intervening in both.
We just talked about NRF2 being the messenger that turns on the good defense genes. I was reading about another pathway called NFKB. NFKB sounds like the exact opposite, the messenger that turns on the bad chronic inflammatory genes.
That is the perfect way to contrast them. NFKB is a transcription factor that acts as the primary alarm bell for the immune system.
So when does it ring?
When a cell experiences stress, toxins, or injury, NFKB travels to the nucleus and triggers the massive rapid production of inflammatory cytokines.
Cytokines, those are the signaling proteins, right?
Yes. These are the chemical signaling proteins like interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, and C-reactive protein, or CRP, that cause tissue swelling, redness, and systemic inflammation.
Wait, so if NFKB is the messenger triggering the alarm, astaxanthin must be somehow intercepting that messenger before it reaches the control room.
That is the exact mechanism. Astaxanthin halts the nuclear translocation of NFKB. It physically prevents the messenger from entering the nucleus.
That's incredible.
By doing this, it completely shuts down the production line for these chronic inflammatory cytokines.
Yeah.
There is even recent proteomic data showing that astaxanthin can directly bind to circulating IL-6 in the blood plasma.
It just grabs onto it.
Yeah, physically neutralizing it and disrupting the inflammatory feedback loop before it can spread to other tissues.
Okay, here is where I want to push back a little bit on behalf of the listener. We hear about 1 million different anti-inflammatory superfoods and supplements.
Oh, absolutely.
Turmeric, ginger, fish oil, tart cherry juice. Everyone claims their product lowers inflammation. What proves this actually works in a chaotic, complex human body, and not just in some isolated, perfectly controlled cells in a petri dish?
It's a completely fair skepticism. The supplement industry is full of petri dish promises that fail in human trials. But the clinical evidence for astaxanthin is what separates the genuine pharmacology from the marketing hype.
Okay, let's hear the proof.
Let's look at a very specific punishing environment. Extreme endurance exercise. There was a randomized, double-blind crossover study involving 19 healthy endurance runners.
Runners put their bodies through a lot.
They really do. They had these athletes take 8 milligrams of astaxanthin daily for 4 weeks, and then subjected them to a grueling 2.25-hour continuous run.
That is a massive amount of physiological trauma. I mean, your muscle fibers are tearing, your joints are pounding, your body would normally be screaming with systemic inflammation after 2 hours of continuous impact.
Exactly. And to measure the impact of the astaxanthin, the researchers didn't just look at one or two generic inflammation markers like CRP. They used an untargeted proteomic analysis.
Meaning they looked at everything.
They mapped out the entire comprehensive profile of thousands of proteins in the athlete's blood. And they found that the astaxanthin supplementation regulated and actively stabilized 82 different immune-related plasma proteins that normally crash or go completely haywire after exhaustive exercise.
82 different proteins.
Yeah. It normalized the expression of 20 critical immunoglobulins, especially IgM.
So it's not just slightly lowering a generic inflammation score by a few points, it is actively holding the entire intricate immune network together under immense physiological duress.
Yes. The immune system wasn't blunted, it was balanced. We see similar systemic results in a completely different study involving male soccer players.
What did they find there?
After 90 days of taking just 4 milligrams of astaxanthin a day, researchers measured a significant sustained increase in their salivary IgA levels.
Salivary IgA. Why are sports scientists testing the spit of soccer players?
Well, immunoglobulin A in the saliva is your mucosal immune system's primary frontline defense.
Oh, okay.
It is the literal shield in your mouth, throat, and respiratory tract against invading viral and bacterial pathogens. Athletes who train intensely often suffer a severe temporary drop in salivary IgA.
Is that why athletes get sick after big events?
Yes. It's often called the open window theory of immunity, which makes them highly susceptible to upper respiratory infections. They train hard, their immune system tanks, and they get sick right before a big match.
But the astaxanthin stopped that.
It boosted this primary defense, showing it directly activates and supports the immune system's rapid response team, including mucosal antibodies, T cells, and natural killer cells.
That's amazing. I was also looking at some fascinating, slightly weird data regarding the gut microbiome in our research stack. Apparently, this red pigment stimulates the growth of a very specific gut bacteria called Akkermansia mucinifila.
Akkermansia is a huge topic right now.
I honestly don't get how an antioxidant feeds a bacteria. Are the microbes eating the pigment for calories?
It's a great question, and the mechanism is incredibly elegant. The bacteria aren't using the astaxanthin as a caloric food source, like they would a prebiotic fiber.
So what are they doing with it?
Well, Akkermansia mucinifila is a specialized symbiotic bacteria that lives exclusively in the mucus layer lining your intestinal wall. It is crucial for maintaining the integrity of that mucosal barrier and preventing leaky gut.
Okay.
But Akkermansia is highly sensitive to oxidative stress in the gut environment. By embedding into the intestinal lining and neutralizing local free radicals, astaxanthin alters the redox state of the gut.
It changes the environment.
Exactly. It creates a highly hospitable, low-stress environment that allows the Akkermansia to naturally flourish and colonize.
It's basically cleaning up the neighborhood so the good bacteria want to move in and build houses.
That's it exactly. And when Akkermansia flourishes, it signals the body to reduce systemic inflammation and improves metabolic markers like glucose tolerance. It highlights just how multi-targeted the downstream effects of this single molecule can be.
Okay, so we've established that it fortifies the cellular membrane, rewires our genetic antioxidant production via NRF2, intercepts inflammatory messengers like NFKB, holds our immune system together under extreme physical stress, and even acts as an interior decorator for the good guys in our gut.
That's quite the resume.
Right. But if astaxanthin can manage all of this in our blood and digestion, how does it handle the most heavily guarded fortresses in the human body? Let's look at the brain and the eyes.
This is the critical juncture where astaxanthin truly separates itself from almost every other well-known antioxidant on the market.
Because of the barriers, right?
Yes. The brain and the eyes are highly privileged organs. They are protected by incredibly selective physiological barricades, the blood-brain barrier and the blood-retinal barrier.
These barriers exist for a very good reason, to keep toxins, heavy metals, and circulating pathogens out of our most sensitive neurological tissues.
Exactly.
But the downside is that they also keep a lot of beneficial drugs and dietary nutrients out.
The brain is a biological paradox of its own. It only accounts for about 2% of our body weight, but it consumes roughly 20% of the body's entire oxygen supply.
That's a huge ratio.
It is. And because it is burning so much oxygen to generate electrical energy, it generates a massive, continuous amount of reactive oxygen species. It is highly susceptible to oxidative stress and lipid peroxidation, especially since the brain is composed largely of fats.
And standard antioxidants can't help.
Most dietary antioxidants like vitamin C or standard polyphenols are either too large or too water-soluble to make it past the tight junctions of the blood-brain barrier.
So they just bounce off, but astaxanthin makes it through.
Yes. Because of its specific low molecular weight and its highly lipophilic properties, both preclinical models and human pharmacokinetic tracking data confirm that astaxanthin successfully crosses the blood-brain barrier and actively accumulates directly in the brain tissue.
Oh, wow. What is it doing once it gets inside the brain? Does it just act as that same rebar shield for neurons?
It does act as a structural shield, but it goes much further. First, clinical literature shows it increases local levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF.
I've heard of BDNF.
Think of BDNF as high-grade fertilizer for the brain. It is a protein crucial for neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons, and the maintenance of synaptic plasticity, which is how we form memories and learn new things.
Okay, that's huge.
Second, it protects neurons against glutamate toxicity. Glutamate is an essential neurotransmitter that excites neurons to fire.
Wow.
But in excess, like during a stroke, a traumatic brain injury, or chronic neurodegenerative disease, glutamate becomes highly toxic.
It overstimulates them.
It literally excites the neurons until they burn out and die. Astaxanthin heavily mitigates that excitotoxic damage.
I was really blown away by the data on cognitive decline. There was a specific study looking at dementia patients that really stood out to me.
Yes, the dementia research highlights its clinical potential in a very measurable way. Patients suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's disease often show an abnormal, highly elevated accumulation of something called phospholipid hydroperoxides, or PLOH, in their red blood cells.
What is PLOH exactly?
PLOH is a primary devastating marker of severe oxidative stress and lipid peroxidation in the blood.
So it's a bad sign.
A very bad sign. It strongly correlates with the severity of cognitive decline. It basically indicates that the lipid membranes of the cells are rusting and breaking down at an accelerated pathological rate.
So a study looked at whether astaxanthin could stop that rusting.
Right. A rigorous clinical study took healthy older individuals who were beginning to experience age-related forgetfulness and mild cognitive impairment. They gave them either a placebo, 6 milligrams, or 12 milligrams of astaxanthin daily for 12 weeks.
And the results?
The researchers found that the astaxanthin uniquely targeted and significantly reduced the levels of PLOH in their red blood cells, bringing the oxidative stress back under control.
That's great, but did it actually help their memory?
That's the best part. The group taking 12 milligrams saw objective, measurable improvements in standardized cognitive test batteries, specifically in areas measuring working memory and complex attention.
Wow.
It didn't just change a blood marker. It directly intervened in the oxidative degradation linked to losing your memory.
That is profound, to actually alter the trajectory of cognitive decline. And what about the eyes? We mentioned the blood-retinal barrier earlier.
Just like the brain, the retina at the back of your eye is an incredibly lipid-rich environment. But unlike the brain, the retina is exposed to constant, direct light energy, making it a massive hotspot for photooxidative damage.
Which makes sense.
Right. And astaxanthin easily crosses the blood-retinal barrier and accumulates right in the macula and retinal tissue.
Let's contextualize this for the modern world. I mean, I spend easily 10 to 12 hours a day staring at a laptop, a phone, or a studio monitor.
Most of us do, yeah.
So what does this mean for the average person whose eyes are glued to a screen? Is taking this basically acting like a pair of internal blue light blocking glasses?
It's actually doing something far more mechanical and biological than just filtering light wavelengths. When you stare at a screen for hours on end, you develop what ophthalmologists call digital eye strain, or asthenopia.
I definitely get that.
Inside your eye, you have ciliary muscles. These are the tiny muscles that constantly contract and relax to adjust the shape of the lens, allowing you to focus. When you stare at a fixed close distance like a phone for hours, those ciliary muscles get locked in a state of continuous spasm and exhaustion.
So my eyes are basically holding a flexed, heavy bicep curl for 10 hours straight. No wonder they ache, and my vision gets blurry by 8 p.m.
That is exactly what is happening.
Yeah.
The muscles are starved of oxygen and pooling with metabolic waste.
And astaxanthin helps with that.
Yes. Clinical trials, typically using doses of 4 to 12 milligrams over a 28-day period, have shown that astaxanthin physically improves the eye's ability to accommodate focus. It directly helps the exhausted ciliary muscle relax. It improves the reflex speed of pupillary constriction, and crucially, It significantly enhances microcirculation in the tiny retinal capillaries.
It reopens the blood flow.
Exactly. It restores the delivery of oxygen and nutrients to the exhausted muscles, clearing out the metabolic waste and eliminating the deep ache of eye strain.
And it's not just temporary screen strain either. The clinical literature gets into some very serious degenerative eye diseases, too.
The therapeutic potential is vast. In preclinical models of glaucoma, which is a disease characterized by elevated intraocular pressure that eventually crushes the optic nerve, astaxanthin significantly lowered the rate of retinal ganglion cell apoptosis.
Apoptosis, meaning cell death.
Right, meaning it stopped the critical nerve cells from committing suicide under the immense pressure.
That's incredible.
And in models of uveitis, which is a severe blinding inflammation of the middle layer of the eye, astaxanthin reduced the production of inflammatory mediators almost as effectively as prednisolone, which is a heavy-duty prescription steroid.
Almost as effectively as a steroid.
Yes. It has even been shown to prevent soluble lens proteins from oxidizing and clumping together, which is the exact underlying chemical cause of cataracts.
It's acting like a comprehensive microscopic maintenance crew for the entire ocular system. Okay, protecting the brain from dementia and the eyes from blindness is undeniably profound for long-term health and quality of life.
Absolutely.
But let's be honest about human nature. A massive portion of the audience is drawn to this supplement for the external, immediate, highly visible results. We need to talk about the fountain of youth claims, the beauty industry's obsession with skin aging, and the fitness industry's obsession with athletic recovery.
The cosmetic and sports supplement industries have definitely capitalized on astaxanthin, and the biology does support them, though we need to carefully separate the proven facts from the exaggerated marketing myths.
Let's start with the skin, the body's largest organ. The beauty literature constantly refers to it as internal skin armor or an edible sunscreen.
Those are catchy terms, but they are grounded in actual pharmacokinetics. When you consume astaxanthin after it circulates through your bloodstream, it actively accumulates in the epidermis and the dermis.
The inner and outer layers.
Right, the outer protective layer and the deep structural layer of your skin.
So when the Haematococcus pluvialis microalgae turn deep red to survive the blistering sun in that drying puddle, we are literally co-opting that exact same biological UV shield and depositing it into our own skin tissue.
Precisely. It acts as a potent internal photoprotector against ultraviolet radiation. UV rays damage the skin primarily by penetrating the tissue and generating massive localized storms of reactive oxygen species.
Free radicals again?
Yes. And these free radicals then activate an enzyme in the skin called matrix metalloproteinase 1, or MMP1.
What does MMP1 actually do to the skin?
MMP1 acts like a pair of molecular scissors. Its biological job is to aggressively cut up and degrade collagen and elastin fibers. Yeah, that chronic degradation of your structural proteins is exactly what causes deep wrinkles, sagging, loss of elasticity, and the leathery texture associated with photoaging.
So astaxanthin stops the scissors.
Exactly. Astaxanthin embeds in the skin and directly suppresses the expression of MMP1, stopping the molecular scissors from ever deploying.
Do we have visible clinical proof of this in humans, or is this just like theoretical chemistry?
We have incredibly robust clinical proof. Multiple double-blind clinical trials, subsequently compiled into rigorous meta-analyses, have demonstrated that oral astaxanthin supplementation, typically around 4 to 12 milligrams a day over an 8 to 16-week period, measurably improves skin elasticity.
Nice.
It increases deep dermal moisture content and visibly reduces the depth of crow's feet and wrinkles.
I also saw the acronym TEWL come up repeatedly in the dermatological studies.
TEDL stands for transepidermal water loss. It measures how much moisture is passively evaporating out of your skin into the air.
Like when your skin just feels parched.
Right. A damaged skin barrier has high TEWL. The skin is dry, flaky, and compromised. Astaxanthin significantly decreases TEWL, meaning it physically strengthens the skin's lipid barrier function, so moisture is locked inside.
And what about the sunburn aspect?
In one fascinating Japanese study, researchers found it even increased the minimal erythema dose. That is the exact amount of UV radiation exposure required to cause a visible sunburn.
Wait, really?
Yeah. By saturating the skin with astaxanthin, it literally increased the human skin's baseline resistance to burning.
That is the definition of internal sunscreen. Now, you mentioned earlier that it mildly inhibits mTOR and activates AMPK, which are the master longevity pathways. So we are talking about aging on a cellular level too, not just cosmetic wrinkles.
Yes, the anti-aging effects go far deeper than the dermis. Beyond cosmetic preservation, astaxanthin modulates highly specific longevity genes. We have data showing it activates FOXO3.
FOXO3.
The FOXO3 gene is intensely studied by geneticists because variations of it are heavily associated with extreme longevity and health span in human centenarians. People who live past 100 with low rates of disease.
That's amazing.
Astaxanthin also interacts with SIRT1, the sirtuin pathway, famous for its role in cellular cleanup, and klotho, a gene that regulates cellular repair and aggressively delays the onset of age-related cellular senescence.
So it's basically telling the body to focus on maintenance.
Exactly. It is fundamentally signaling the body's DNA to prioritize deep repair and maintenance over the rapid cellular turnover that leads to aging.
Okay, that covers the beauty and longevity angle. Now, let's talk about the athletes and the gym goers, because this is where the clinical reviews point out a major, widespread misconception.
Yes, the performance myth.
Every time a new, powerful supplement hits the fitness world, people immediately assume it's going to instantly make them run a faster 5K or add 20 pounds to their bench press.
And that is exactly the myth we need to definitively bust today, based on the aggregated data from the latest sports medicine meta-analyses.
The myth being that Astaxanthin is a direct ergogenic aid.
Right. An ergogenic aid is a substance that immediately and directly enhances physical performance output, like caffeine stimulating the central nervous system, or creatine instantly increasing ATP availability for explosive power.
So Astaxanthin doesn't do that.
No. The vast majority of randomized controlled trials show consistently that Astaxanthin will not act as an acute ergogenic aid. It will not magically boost your VO2 max. It will not significantly increase your peak power output on a stationary bike.
So taking it right before a workout won't do much.
If you take a pill an hour before a sprint, it is not going to shave seconds off your time.
So if you're taking this right before you run a marathon, it's not going to strap a rocket to your back.
It won't. That is fundamentally not its mechanism of action.
But the reality is that it acts as a master of recovery. It acts like an elite pit crew, rapidly repairing your engine the absolute second you cross the finish line.
Exactly. If we look at the biology of exercise, intense physical exertion inflicts severe mechanical microtears and massive crushing oxidative stress on your muscle tissue. Your muscle fiber membranes are literally being ripped apart at a microscopic level.
Which is why we get so sore.
Astaxanthin's true, proven power in sports medicine is how rapidly and comprehensively it repairs that structural damage.
How do researchers actually measure that repair? You can't just ask an athlete, how sore are you? That's too subjective.
Right. You measure the wreckage in the bloodstream. We look at specific biomarkers of muscle damage, specifically enzymes called creatine kinase, or CK, and lactate dehydrogenase, or LDH.
Where do those come from?
Normally, these enzymes live safely inside the guts of the muscle cell. They only leak out into the blood when the cell membrane has been violently ruptured. A high CK level means your muscle cells have burst open.
And what does the Astaxanthin do to those levels?
Meta-analyses show that chronic Astaxanthin supplementation promotes massive, highly consistent reductions in both CK and LDH post-exercise.
So fewer cells are bursting.
Exactly. By keeping these numbers low, the clinical data proves that Astaxanthin successfully preserves the structural integrity of the muscle cell membranes, even under extreme load. It stops the cells from bursting.
That's a huge advantage.
It also significantly reduces AOPP, advanced oxidation protein products, which proves it halts the systemic protein degradation that normally follows heavy physical exertion. It stops the damage, allowing the muscle to adapt and rebuild faster.
Okay, so we've comprehensively covered the what, the how, and the why. This molecule fortifies cell membranes with chemical rebar, rewires our genetic antioxidant production, intercepts inflammatory signals, crosses the blood-brain barrier to protect our memory, shields our skin from UV radiation, and rapidly repairs torn muscle fibers.
It's an incredible list.
It really is. For anyone listening, the obvious practical next question is, how do we actually get this into our bodies efficiently? Let's talk natural sources, correct dosing, and the very specific rules of bioavailability.
The most direct evolutionary way to get it naturally is through your diet, specifically through marine food chains.
So lots of seafood.
As we discussed, you want to look at wild-caught salmon, specifically sockeye salmon, which possesses the highest concentration of naturally occurring astaxanthin of any fish, which is why its flesh is that incredibly deep, vibrant red.
Right.
Wild rainbow trout, krill oil, and crustaceans like shrimp, lobster, and crab are also solid dietary sources.
But let's be realistic about modern life. Most people are not eating a pound of wild sockeye salmon every single day. I mean, it's expensive and totally impractical.
True.
That brings almost everyone to supplementation. What does the clinical data say is the actual effective daily dose?
If you aggregate the majority of the clinical trials that demonstrated statistically significant positive effects on eye accommodation, skin elasticity, cognitive protection, and immune support, they consistently utilize daily dosages between 4 milligrams and 12 milligrams.
4 to 12 milligrams. Okay.
From a regulatory standpoint, the U.S. FDA has approved doses up to 12 milligrams per day as a safe dietary supplement.
And in Europe?
In Europe, the European Food Safety Authority, or EFSA, conducted a massive exhaustive review of all toxicological data in 2019 and updated their acceptable daily intake to 0.2 milligrams per kilogram of body weight.
So for a normal adult, what is that?
For an average 70-kilogram adult, that equates to about 14 milligrams a day, and that number includes an incredibly high built-in safety margin.
So 4 to 12 milligrams seems to be the widely accepted therapeutic sweet spot. But here is a crucial question for the listener. If I go to the store, buy a high-quality bottle of natural Astaxanthin capsules, and I swallow a 12-milligram pill with a glass of water on an empty stomach first thing in the morning, am I just completely flushing my money down the drain?
Yes. Honestly, yes. If you take Astaxanthin on a completely empty stomach with just a glass of water, you are severely critically limiting its absorption. You might be absorbing single-digit percentages of the capsule.
Just single digits?
Yes. Understanding this is the golden rule of Astaxanthin pharmacokinetics.
And that's because of its structure. We talked about it being lipophilic. It loves fat. It hates water.
Exactly. Astaxanthin's entire massive carbon chain molecular structure is designed specifically to embed in lipids. In the human digestive tract, the environment is mostly water.
Right.
A highly fat-soluble molecule like astaxanthin cannot be absorbed directly across the intestinal wall into the watery environment of the portal bloodstream. It must be consumed with a significant source of healthy dietary fats.
Walk us through the anatomy of that. What actually happens in the stomach and intestines when I take the pill with, like, a handful of almonds or half an avocado?
When you consume the astaxanthin alongside dietary fats, the presence of the fat triggers your gallbladder to contract and release bile salts into the small intestine.
Okay, bile salt.
These bile salts act as a biological emulsifier. They mix with the dietary fats in the astaxanthin to form tiny microscopic droplets called mixed micelles.
It's exactly like using dish soap to break up a greasy pan, right? The soap surrounds the grease so it can be washed away in the water.
That is the perfect chemical analogy. Once the astaxanthin is trapped inside these tiny micelle droplets, it can finally be absorbed by the enterocytes, the cells lining your intestinal wall.
And then it goes to the blood.
Well, once inside the intestinal cell, the astaxanthin is packaged into large transport vehicles called chylomicrons. From there, it enters your lymphatic system, which is the body's fat transport network.
Wait, it goes into the lymph system, not the blood.
Initially, yes. This is a crucial distinction. Water-soluble nutrients go straight into the blood and hit the liver immediately for processing.
Ah, the first-pass metabolism.
Exactly. Fat-soluble nutrients in the lymphatic system entirely bypass that initial first-pass metabolism in the liver. Eventually, the lymphatic system dumps the astaxanthin into the general bloodstream, where it hitches a ride on your circulating cholesterol particles, specifically VLDL, LDL, and HDL.
So cholesterol acts like a taxi service?
Those lipoproteins act as the delivery trucks, transporting the astaxanthin deep into your skin, your eyes, your muscle tissue, and across the blood-brain barrier.
But without the fat, none of this happens.
Right. Without that initial dietary fat triggering the bile salts to form the micelles, the entire delivery system fails. The pill just passes right through your digestive tract and out the other end.
Okay, that is a vital, non-negotiable, practical tip. Always, always take it with a meal containing fat. But before the listener runs out to stock their fridge with wild salmon or buy a year's supply of algae extract, we have to look at the other side of the coin.
The biology of consequence.
Exactly. We need to talk about side effects, drug interactions, and the hidden risks, because as we all know, nothing in biology is a free lunch.
That is a fundamental rule of pharmacology that people often forget when dealing with supplements. Any molecule powerful enough to cross the blood-brain barrier, rewrite genetic transcription pathways, and massively alter the inflammatory cascade must be treated with the respect of a highly active pharmacological agent.
It's not just a casual, inert, gummy vitamin.
Definitely not.
Let's start with the minor, slightly weird side effects, the gastrointestinal quirks.
At standard clinical doses of 4 to 12 milligram, astaxanthin is exceptionally well tolerated by the vast majority of people. But the most commonly reported, benign side effect is an increase in bowel movement frequency, and specifically red or orange-colored stool.
Which, if you aren't warned about it in advance, could be absolutely terrifying. I mean, people might think they are experiencing internal bleeding.
Oh, absolutely. It leads to a lot of panic calls to the doctor.
Yeah.
But it is completely harmless. It is simply the unabsorbed fraction of that deep red pigment passing safely through the digestive tract.
Yeah.
Similarly, at very high chronic doses, usually well above the recommended 12 milligrams, some people develop a condition called carotenodermia. This is where the skin, particularly the palms of the hands and soles of the feet, takes on a slight visible orange or yellowish tint.
Because the skin is literally saturating with the pigment.
Yes. But again, it is completely benign and fully reversible. Once you lower the dose or stop the supplement, the pigment clears from the skin within a few weeks.
Okay, red stool and a slight orange glow. Weird, but biologically harmless. Now let's get into the serious systemic physiological interactions. The medical literature highlights a major, largely unspoken warning regarding an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase.
This is a crucial physiological interaction that the supplement marketing industry almost never talks about.
Never.
In rigorous laboratory assays, Astaxanthin has been shown to act as a partial inhibitor of the enzyme 5-alpha reductase.
Let's break that down. What does the 5-alpha reductase enzyme actually do in the human body?
It is the primary enzyme responsible for converting standard testosterone into DHT, or dihydrotestosterone.
And DHT is?
DHT is a much more potent androgenic hormone that acts heavily on the skin, the hair follicles, and the prostate gland.
Hold on. Inhibiting the conversion of testosterone to DHT, isn't that the exact biological mechanism of prescription hair loss drugs? Medications like finasteride or dutasteride.
Yes, it is the exact same mechanism. Pharmaceutical drugs used to treat male pattern baldness and benign prostatic hyperplasia, an enlarged prostate, work by aggressively blocking this exact 5-alpha reductase enzyme, starving the scalp and prostate of DHT.
So astaxanthin mimics those drugs.
Because astaxanthin naturally mimics this specific pharmacological mechanism, chronic supplementation could potentially provoke similar secondary endocrine side effects in susceptible individuals.
It's wild to think that an antioxidant extracted from a stressed puddle of algae can actively meddle with your reproductive hormones in the exact same way a synthetic prescription hair loss drug does.
That's very potent.
It really highlights the fact that natural absolutely does not mean inert.
What kind of clinical side effects are we talking about here for someone who might be sensitive?
We are talking about potential peripheral hormonal dysregulation. In men, significantly lowering DHT levels could manifest as a noticeable loss of libido, sudden erectile dysfunction, chronic fatigue, or even gynecomastia, which is the abnormal growth of glandular breast tissue.
That's pretty serious. It is. Anyone currently taking a pharmaceutical 5-alpha reductase inhibitor or anyone undergoing specific endocrinological or hormonal treatments should absolutely not add astaxanthin to their regimen without strict monitored screening from their physician. You do not want to accidentally double dose that enzyme inhibition.
That is a massive caveat that people need to be aware of. What about other serious drug interactions? The pharmacological data lists several concerns based on astaxanthin's systemic effects. Let's look at cardiovascular health and blood pressure.
Astaxanthin has a mild but measurable vasodilatory effect. It helps the smooth muscle lining of the blood vessels relax, which slightly lowers systemic vascular resistance and reduces blood pressure.
For a normal person, this is great for cardiovascular health, right?
Yeah. But if a patient is already taking powerful prescription antihypertensive medications like ACE inhibitors, calcium channel blockers, or beta blockers, the astaxanthin can synergize with the drugs. The risk there is severe hypotension.
Meaning their blood pressure drops dangerously low.
Exactly. The compounding effect can cause the blood pressure to bottom out, leading to severe postural dizziness when standing up, unexplained chronic fatigue, or even sudden fainting spells.
And what about blood sugar management? We mentioned earlier that it improves insulin sensitivity and glucose tolerance via the AMPK energy sensing pathway.
It's the same principle of compounding effects. For a healthy person, or even a pre-diabetic looking to improve metabolic markers, increasing insulin sensitivity is fantastic.
But for a diabetic?
For a diagnosed diabetic patient who is actively taking oral hypoglycemic drugs like metformin or injecting exogenous insulin, the astaxanthin can push their blood sugar too low too fast, causing an iatrogenic hypoglycemic event. Their medication doses might need to be carefully recalibrated by an endocrinologist to account for the supplement's metabolic boost.
The literature also brings up an increased bleeding risk.
Yes, Astaxanthin exhibits mild antiplatelet aggregation properties.
Yeah.
This means it slightly inhibits the blood platelets from sticking together and forming clots.
Gotcha.
If you mix astaxanthin with pharmaceutical blood thinners like warfarin, antiplatelet drugs like aspirin or clopidogrel, or even stack it with very high daily doses of NSAIDs like ibuprofen or high-dose omega-3 fish oils, you significantly increase the relative risk of spontaneous bleeding, bleeding gums when brushing, and severe bruising from minor trauma.
Okay, what about the immune system? We spent a massive amount of time talking about how incredible it is that astaxanthin boosts salivary IgA T cells and natural killer cells. Could having a hypervigilant immune system ever be a bad thing?
It is a profoundly bad thing if your specific medical treatment relies entirely on suppressing the immune system.
Like organ transplants.
Exactly. For patients who have recently received organ transplants and cannot afford tissue rejection, or those managing severe hyperactive autoimmune diseases like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis with corticosteroids or pharmaceutical immunosuppressants.
Taking this would fight their meds.
Yes, taking a powerful immune-stimulating compound, like astaxanthin, could directly contradict and override their medication. It could theoretically reverse the efficacy of their life-saving therapy and trigger a massive flare-up.
That makes perfect sense. Biological context is everything. There is one more very specific physiological warning in the research regarding skeletal health.
This one stems primarily from preclinical animal models and in vitro studies, but the biological implications warrant close monitoring. The data shows that astaxanthin strongly inhibits the formation, fusion, and overall activity of osteoclasts.
What is the exact function of an osteoclast?
Your skeleton is not a dead static structure. It is constantly being remodeled. You have osteoblasts, which build new bone tissue, and osteoclasts, which break down and resorb old, damaged bone tissue.
And astaxanthin stops the breakdown.
Astaxanthin aggressively halts the osteoclast from breaking down bone.
Wait, halting bone breakdown sounds like it would be a purely good thing, especially for preventing something like osteoporosis, right?
In theory, yes. And some early models suggest it could play a protective role against pathological bone degradation. However, skeletal remodeling is a highly delicate, heavily regulated calcium balance. When osteoclasts break down bone, they mobilize stored calcium from the skeleton and release it into the bloodstream.
I see.
If you artificially and chronically inhibit osteoclast activity, you alter that mobilization. Therefore, patients suffering from chronic parathyroid dysfunction, severe senile osteoporosis, or hypocalcemia, meaning chronically low blood calcium, need to be monitored very carefully by a doctor if they decide to supplement, as it could seriously disrupt their systemic calcium homeostasis.
And finally, based on the global regulatory guidelines, who should just avoid taking it entirely right now?
The current safety consensus, echoing the EFSA, the FDA, and other global pharmacological bodies, is that concentrated astaxanthin supplements, specifically therapeutic doses of 8 to 12 milligrams, should be strictly restricted to adults and older adolescents over the age of 14.
What about pregnancy?
Due to a complete lack of consolidated long-term safety data in highly vulnerable developing populations, it is strictly advised against for pregnant or breastfeeding women and young children.
And allergies, I assume.
Naturally. Anyone with a severe known allergy to microalgae or the specific marine sources it is extracted from, like a shellfish allergy for krill-based astaxanthin, should steer entirely clear. Always consult your primary care physician or a specialist before adding a highly bioactive gene-modulating compound like this to your daily routine.
Absolutely. The medical disclaimer on this show is always real, but it is especially critical when dealing with a molecule this physiologically active. Okay, we have covered an incredible, massive amount of biological ground today.
We really have.
From the drying, irradiated puddles where Haematococcus pluvialis builds its chemical bunker, to the steel rebar spanning the lipid bilayers of our own cellular membranes. We've explored how the NRF2 pathway wakes up our endogenous antioxidant factories, the profound protection of the brain against lipid rusting, the rapid recovery of torn muscle fibers, and the very real, complex pharmacological boundaries and risks of 5-alpha reductase inhibition.
It is a testament to the sheer breathtaking complexity and interconnectedness of biological systems. I mean, a molecule designed to block UV light in algae ends up preserving memory in a human brain.
It really is. And I want to leave you, the listener, with one final mind-bending concept to ponder as you go about your day. Think about the massive evolutionary timeline here. Microalgae originally evolved this astaxanthin molecule hundreds of millions of years ago.
Long before we were around.
Right. It was purely a chemical force field, a desperate, brilliant survival mechanism for when their aquatic environments violently dried up and they were blasted by raw, unfiltered solar radiation. Today, by deliberately extracting and consuming this exact same molecule, humans are essentially downloading millions of years of rigorous evolutionary survival tech directly into our own cell membranes.
We're borrowing their defense system.
We are literally hacking the natural world's ancient defense systems to protect our brains from modern dementia, our eyes from artificial digital screens, and our skin from the sun. It begs a fascinating question. Are we just scratching the surface of borrowing biological software from the ocean? What other ancient, untapped survival codes are out there waiting to be translated into human medicine?
Nature has been running the longest, most brutal, most rigorous clinical trial in the history of the planet. We're just finally learning how to read the results and apply them.
I couldn't agree more. If this deep dive sparked your curiosity, I highly encourage you to check out the research stack we referenced, consult your doctor about your own specific health profile, and keep digging into the incredible, intricate science of your own biology. Remember, your body isn't a simple machine, it's a highly adaptive ecosystem. Thanks for diving in with us.